How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me today.
You are doing well. Yes, you are. See, that's how this is going to roll. Um, I did have a question before we get into everything. I know Ryan's working on something. I think he's working on Wordle or something
Or
like that.
yeah,
Something
I did
super
I haven't,
not
I
important.
haven't,
yet.
I haven't played my New York Times games today yet, so
I
we'll have to,
yeah, don't worry about it. It'll be there for you tomorrow. You're
no
good.
spoilers.
So we're going to be talking about toxicity and toxic hires and things like that. But a thought came to me. These all always happen at night, usually when I'm about to go to sleep or at sleep. Is is toxic subjective? Meaning the way that I was thinking about it last night is like legal and illegal. There's pretty much a nice little line between the two. Something that's moral or immoral, subjective. Ethical or unethical, still subjective. Toxic, can one person's toxic hire be another person's great hire?
Mm.
And so that's what I went. That's where I went to sleep. Is actually trying to pondering this the subjectivity. Is toxic hires, are they subjective?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I hear the term toxic hire, there's a couple things that come to mind. First of all, so one, it's that it's an employee who negatively impacts team dynamics and productivity.
Right.
Who it has a major impact on workplace morale. And then someone who like threatens the customer base in more ways than one, right? So
Right.
like it could be a rude customer service agent who someone doesn't want to interact with the next time they come into your establishment, or it can be just there's so many different things that you can relate to the term toxic
Right.
that it's hard to say whether it could be good for one and bad for another, right?
Well, it's you help me unpack some of this because it's if we think about it from risk, and we could take toxic and say, hey, whether or not it's toxic or not, does this hire increase your risk?
Yeah.
And what is your
Yeah.
risk tolerance?
Right. I mean, toxic hires, I mean, often exhibit poor collaboration, lack of accountability.
Right.
They're disruptive in the workplace. They're showing unethical conduct. I mean, they can drain your resources. They increase turnover, and ultimately, at the end of the day, they're going to damage your company culture and your reputation. Right.
Right.
So
So,
it's the prevention of that's key.
100%. So a company needs to know itself because some of that sounds like from company to company, it could be the same or very similar. But let's say we're hiring a VP of sales, and again, in a particular environment, I'll just make it really simple. In an all male sales environment, he crushes things. He's just an alpha amongst alphas. Just everybody wins. There is no business risk, or the risk is, nominal. Sales are through the roof, etc. But you take that guy and put him in a co-ed or a diverse sales environment, which is pretty much everybody, right? They don't flourish. And oh, by the way, risk, toxicity, everything goes up. But they were the same person.
Well, and you never know too, right? Because they may have been perceived as a toxic employee in the all male culture,
Ah, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
someone
Okay.
maybe someone was afraid to speak out about it because
Yeah,
you
because
know
it's an alpha male. Yeah, yeah,
it's an
yeah.
alpha male. You're at work, and you don't want to lose your job. I mean, who
Right,
knows?
right. All right, so that's what I was thinking about last night. You've helped me, by the way, so appreciate that, Jeremy. Ryan? Are you done doing your Wordle? Can we?
I am almost done doing my Wordle. I just
Good.
I can't seem to get the answer to. I don't want to spoil it for you,
No, no
Jeremy.
worries. No, please don't.
No spoilers.
Please don't. Why don't we do introductions real quick?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's do it, Jeremy. You want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Ryan, why
Kick
don't
us
you go?
Well,
off.
you're pointing to me on the screen, so I'm assuming you're pointing to me.
Sure. Yeah.
But Jeremy,
Ryan, why
go
don't
ahead.
you introduce you?
I'll let you go first, Jeremy.
Okay.
All right, yeah, sure. My name is Jeremy Gordon. I'm the head of marketing at Cisive. We're a global background screening company that focuses predominantly in the financial services, healthcare, and transportation sectors.
Those are for those at home. Those are highly regulated industries.
Very highly regulated, yes.
There you go. So y'all are specialists in that world of highly regulated, I would assume.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. All right. I get it. Where are y'all based?
So the company is fully remote. We do have a headquarters in New York, but our employees are spread out all across the globe.
Okay. And I'm assuming you're integrated with a bunch of ATSs?
Oh yeah, yeah. Obviously all the big ones. Workday, iCIMS, Oracle, ADP. And a lot of smaller, more niche players as well.
Right.
And so we because we specialize in these highly regulated vertical industries, we integrate with a lot of ATSs that also specialize in those industries. So
Right. I know Oracle has a pretty good healthcare practice, pretty healthy healthcare practice. So I'm assuming that that's Oracle recruiting
yes.
cloud. I would assume that that's probably been pretty big for y'all. Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Ryan Leary. There's not much to know. Mic drop. I'm done. No. So you guys probably know me. Just been in the space for a long time in recruiting and RPO, and working with a lot of marketing teams in the space. And now William and I we're with Work Defined. So podcasting all day, every day, which is kind of what we're doing right now. So that's
That
cool.
is correct.
Yeah.
William Tin Cup. There you go. That's all I got.
Not much more to say.
That's all that is.
The man who needs no introduction.
No, it's not so much.
Uh,
It's not that. That would be
that
definitely.
was definitely what you were thinking.
No. I hate introductions. This is my bit. Like when people introduce me at a conference and I hear that introduction, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard. I hate hearing stuff about me.
Well, I agree. I hate talking about myself. Right. So that's
Same
it.
bit.
Yeah.
So I just basically, when people are like, "How do I contact you?" I'm like, Google. I don't know.
Google. So would it be really uncomfortable, Jeremy, if we just start asking you about your background?
Oh heck yeah! No, that'd be good. Let's do a start there. No. So
Yeah.
we've obviously we've got some things to talk about today during this
Yeah.
live stream, and the reason Ryan and I like live streams because we've done thousands of webinars at least, over the course of 20
Yeah.
years,
Mm.
and
Sure.
we've just beaten to death with webinars. Just kind of seems like we just got tired of them. I'll just be honest. Just got tired of the format. Got tired of doing the bit, and live streams just kind of seem like there's more kind of 30-year-old dynamite to them. Like they can go really well or not, and so I think both Ryan and I like that risk, and also broadcasting across a bunch of different channels just to kind of see what's there. So, and Jeremy has signed up for that. So
Yes.
there you
Raw
go.
and unscripted. Here we are.
Yeah.
So
So
the official name of our thing, Ryan, what is that?
spotting toxic hires, safeguarding culture, and protecting the bottom line.
That's
That's
three
what we're
things,
talking about.
right? So essentially, you got to spot the toxic hire. You're really safeguarding your culture, making sure your culture
Mm.
stays intact. And oh, by the way, there's a profit motive with this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's unpack that. Ryan, do you want to ask questions? Or do you want me to?
Yeah. I'll kick off. So Jeremy, we talk a lot about this topic,
Yeah.
and we joke a lot about it as well. We talk about toxic hires. We joke about it. We make fun of it, but it's actually pretty serious.
100%.
Let's. What I want to do is kick off with a definition of what a real toxic hire is. It's not just a bad employee.
Right.
When you hear the term toxic hire, what do you think about?
Actually, that's really good, Ryan, because
That's why I asked it.
a bad no, not that. The a bad hire is a bad hire. Like you
Yeah,
could just make a bad hire. It's a poor hire. Like, all right, we had 5 people.
it
We
happens.
added a person and they suck. Okay, that's a
Yeah.
performance issue,
Yeah,
Correct.
right? We just didn't make the right hire.
yeah,
That's not necessarily a toxic hire.
right.
Right.
Performance is
Yeah, I
not
think
toxic.
I think the differentiator there is the person's impact on the workplace, right? So and the people around them, the overall culture, right? So as you mentioned, if you hire someone who's just not qualified for the job, sure, that could have an impact on their fellow employees who maybe have to take on more work and stuff like that. But when you think of a truly toxic person, someone who just has such a negative impact on team dynamics, and maybe they're just always a Debbie Downer, or maybe they have the ability to do the job, they just don't desire to do it, don't want to do it, and so they lean on their other employees for that purpose. or there's just a general they bring about a general reduction in morale, right?
Right.
So that to me that's what a toxic hire is. It's not someone who's just in their own little bubble, not performing, but they're bringing down everyone around them. And that's kind of the differentiator. And
Getting back to those three spokes, right?
yeah,
That's,
yeah,
again,
yeah. When you think about a toxic employee is going to at the end in the end cause otherwise non-toxic high performing employees to quit and seek other employment
it's cancerous.
if they're unchecked in their behavior.
Right. It becomes cancerous. It can and metastasize, and it see its way through to other employees. There's a famous quote or quip that stupid people don't know they're stupid. I don't know who said it, or maybe I just did. Anywho,
Yeah.
the point is
It might have been you, but I liked
yeah,
it.
I really wanted to put it on somebody else, Abe Lincoln or something, but no, I think I just did that. Anyhow, the bit is do toxic people know they're toxic?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would think it's a yes and no, right? I mean, they have to know who they are,
Right.
but they may not be fully aware that of the impact that they're having on the people around them.
I can see that.
And
Um,
they may not care. I mean, I think of Terrell
yeah,
Owens, you go back to sports, but I think of Terrell Owens in this situation.
Yeah,
Fantastic player,
yeah.
right? Like outperforms the world. But he brought the locker room down and
He
crushed the
and he
Eagles
knew it.
for
yeah,
and he knew it and he
He
didn't
knew it.
care, right?
Yes.
He didn't know it. The famous I'm doing sit-ups on my lawn for all the
Right.
media to see.
Right.
But I don't I almost look at an employee and a toxic employee kind of like that where he knew what he was doing. He didn't care. And I don't
right.
think he can control him personally. I don't think he could control the fact that he didn't care.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
just his makeup. And I think there are some employees that do that, and it just doesn't matter what you do. We've all
That's
seen them.
that's
Doesn't matter
fascinating.
what you do,
Can
how
we
you handle it.
can we screen for that if it's a personality trait?
Hmm.
Jeremy,
I
I'm just gonna
mean,
throw it up in the air. I don't know. Let's see.
sometimes
Okay.
yes.
What are we looking
I
for
mean,
when we
depending on what
screen
the
for?
indicators of that personality trait are, right?
Okay. And so some people, like the way I've gotten it from both of you is, okay, some people might not be self-aware. They might not understand the impact to the company or their team. And some people might know exactly what they're doing and don't care,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, and to piggyback on Ryan's sports analogy, I mean, think of someone like LeBron James, right? Who knows he's probably the greatest basketball player on the court right now. And is he a team player? I I
Yeah,
wouldn't say so.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I
He
I
he
if I
runs the team.
if I was looking up team player in the dictionary, I wouldn't expect to see LeBron James's picture, right?
Right, right.
But I mean, does he carries the team, and he knows that he does, and so they keep him on because he's their star performing player. I mean, we saw his performance in the Olympics, and it's just like, to what's the ultimate cost of that, right? Do we know how are the other team members? Do they just want to win? And maybe they do, and that's fine if that's how it is. But if there's someone who's sitting on the bench all day because LeBron's getting all the play time, that's gonna have a major impact on that person's morale on the team,
I
and
lo-
the decision whether or not they stay or go.
I love the analogy of the Olympics because it was a different. It seemed to be all of those players actually. They all seemed to be different.
Yeah,
Like they wanted to
Yeah.
win the gold so bad that egos kind of came down. Like they basically, they didn't have to be the player there on their own team. So that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, if A players hire A players, B players hire C players, C players hire D, F, all that type of stuff. If true, this is gonna be an if-then statement. So if true, then where does toxicity come into that? Meaning, would an A player be able to consume more toxicity because they want an A player versus a B player hiring? I'm thinking about team hiring too,
Hmm.
specifically. And you get a bunch of B players together to hire. My gut tells me they care more about toxicity.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, I
Now,
think I think
I
I
have
think that's a
no
good.
data. I have no data to support that, by the way.
Yeah.
Just
No, I mean, I think it's a good question and an interesting thing to explore. I would think as a manager, if your A player is toxic, you're going to be willing to put up with a little bit more toxicity than you would from a C or D player who is exhibiting those same behaviors. Is that right? No, not necessarily.
that's right.
It's the, just the fact of the matter. The problem comes is when your other A players see that, and it impacts their morale and other things. So if you have to let go of an A player to save you know three B players, it might be
I can see that. All
worthwhile.
of our sports analogies that are going on in our minds right now,
Yeah,
they're all
There's a
playing
million
out.
of them.
They're all
But it,
playing out because
exactly.
the locker room, the clubhouse,
yeah,
all that stuff's going through our heads right
yeah,
now because we're thinking. T.O. is a great example, right?
yeah. Well, I've got
For the
more. I've got
Cowboys,
Joel Embiid. I mean, I've got them. They're
same
all
bit.
here in Philly.
Yeah, well, no, I got a few in Dallas too, Kyrie.
Yeah,
Anywho,
yeah.
so like the thing is like, are you willing to put up with that? And if you are, like Jimmy Johnson when he was the Cowboys coach 100 years ago, he would let Michael Irvin be Michael Irvin if he got 4 touchdowns a game or 2 touchdowns a game.
Right.
Like he would allow, like, okay,
Yeah.
you want to go do coke, be with a bunch of strippers, and just kind of hang out and do whatever. Okay, are you gonna give me two on Sunday? That's really all I
That's
care
what he
about.
cared about.
So, do corporations behave in the same way that sports franchises behave as it
Unfortunately,
relates?
I think yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
That's
Have you seen situations? I'm curious about this now that we're talking about it. Have you seen situations where an A player who's toxic in the organization gets a little more leeway and they deal with it in a different way? That affects, the next level, right? Affects the B's and the C's. They don't want to leave the company because they don't necessarily want to leave. They like the company, and they're not sure what their next move potentially would be, but their performance is now inhibited by the
interesting.
toxicity, right, of the A player, but they still stay in that role. They just don't do anything. They just kind of come in,
Their
and now they're
performance,
middle of the road, and they
Yeah.
just kind of stay there and stay the course. But they're not performing. They're not underperforming. They're
right?
not performing as to what you would expect them to.
Yeah, I think it's far more common than you would think.
Yeah, they've just become demotivated,
Yeah.
and so they'll
Yeah.
do what they need to do to keep their job, but they're not going to
Hey,
excel. But in the
Well, it's
sports,
where things like quiet quitting come into
yep,
play. We heard
yep,
that term pop up in the last couple of years, and it may, and right now because we're definitely not in an employee market, right? It's
right.
very much so an employer market. People aren't necessarily quitting their jobs, but when that next opportunity comes around, it makes it that much easier for them to jump ship.
Right. In a sports analogy, you just tell the player to get better,
Yeah,
right? I
right,
mean, that's what a coach would do is like,
yeah,
you don't like your playing time?
get better.
Okay, we'll get better.
right.
That would be what a coach would do, and maybe they would help them get better, but they wouldn't care as much because they've got a whole slew of people that want that job.
Right.
Where it's different in corporate, where it's not that way. People are struggling to find talent. So
Sure.
let me ask kind of the next question on the list. How do you sniff out a safety risk in disguise? So
Well, I mean, I
advice
think,
for our peers. How do you sniff that out?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a way a person behaves in their personal life is largely indicative of how they will behave in their professional life,
Hmm,
right? I mean, after all, we're all kind of creatures of habit, right? So, unfortunately, employees, especially new hires, tend to be, for the most part, on their best behavior in the office. And it can be months or even years before a person's true colors start to show. And by then, it's too late, right? The damage
right,
is done. And I also think there's tremendous pressure on companies to hire quickly.
right.
But hiring managers are also scared of making a bad decision. So you're split in two different ways, right? You end up with like an ungodly long interview process where you make good candidates jump through hoops like circus animals, and or or you have super high turnaround because they're so desperate to fill the role that they'll take anyone with half a pulse.
Right.
So
And even some that don't have a pulse.
yeah, right.
They just need to put somebody in that role. And
Yeah.
so it's basically lowering expectations.
A warm
And-
body is better than no body, right?
Right. Right. In some positions, I can see that. So the behavior, are you looking at behavior historically and in reference checking and things like that? Are you looking at behavior,
Yeah.
online? Like where are you,
So-
or even in the interview process? Like where are you evaluating their behavior?
Yeah, so I mean, I think your basic pre-employment background check is going to be a good window into that, and a good initial window, right, into that behavior, right? So does does the person have any kind of checkered past that you're able
Right.
to see? Reference checks are a huge point of that, right? I know a lot of days now employers are unwilling to say anything negative about a former employee, right? All they can do is really just verify that yes, that they worked here. But getting references, professional and personal references, is huge, especially as the higher up the role is, right? When they're as they're going into management and climbing the ranks up to the executive level. I mean, those kind of professional and personal references are going to be key. And then, there's social media screening, which is a newer screening tool that's becoming more and more popular nowadays, where we're able to look at the public profiles on all the various social media sites. That can really give you a clear picture of who that person is from a cultural perspective, right? How they behave in their personal life, what they post on social media, the kind of language they use. That's going to be largely indicative of how they'll operate at work as well.
So how do you, first of all, I noticed that you didn't mention credit report as,
Yeah.
like you mentioned background check, but to me, I think you could probably garner a lot of information about people if they allow you to run their credit report. You run a credit report. Seems
well,
like you,
for financial positions, of course.
Yeah. So I mean,
or not.
credit. Well, the credit report is very tricky because
Yes, it
you
is.
do have to have a permissible purpose
That's right.
to run a credit report, right? And I mean, to run any kind of background check, you have to have permissible purpose. But specifically in the credit report, most of the times, if the person doesn't have any kind of fiduciary responsibility, you shouldn't be running a credit report on them because it's just opening you up to, wrongful claims that you just don't want to get involved in. So honestly, you should be tailoring your background checks to the specific role and the specific industry that you're hiring into. There's no such thing as a one size fits all when it comes to background screening.
So how do we get this is an interesting point, Jeremy. How do we get a company, let's say hiring managers, but a company that wants to just do a blanket background check on an individual, where you're saying it's not necessary to know everything about everybody, tailor it to the role. What if the company doesn't want someone who has a checkered past, a criminal background, or William, in your case, where
Yeah.
they murder
Sarcasm.
people,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So how do you talk them off the ledge there?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's a big push these days for fair chance hiring, right?
That's
I
right.
mean, we have
the box.
we have a lot of ban the box laws in
Mm-hmm.
in various states and counties and cities throughout the country. And what that simply says is that you're not allowed to inquire about a person's criminal history until in most cases, you've made them an offer of employment. Right. So it used to be, it's called ban the box because on an employment application, there used to be a checkbox that says, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And you would check that box. And most of the time, employers would just put that resume right into the shredder. And they weren't really giving that person an opportunity to, see if they're a right fit for the role. So now you have to go through the interview process and actually make them an offer of employment before you're even allowed to check anything, right? So, and there are a lot of companies out there, that are focused on fair chance hiring, right? They specifically want to hire people who are looking for a second chance, and a lot of times those end up being some of the best workers that you can hire, right? Because they've been through it, they've been through the ringer, they're grateful to have a job,
Loyalty,
loyal, and they're going to be loyal to you. Absolutely, you took a chance on them, they're going to be loyal to you.
big time. The in those cases where you make an offer, I've seen that at least historically be contingent on a criminal background check.
Right.
So we'll
Yeah.
make you an offer. However, we are going to get your permission to run a criminal background check. We're going to run a criminal background check, and we might rescind said offer based on what we find.
Yeah, almost every employment offer nowadays is going to have a sentence that says this offer is contingent upon the successful completion of a background check. And what that means, is you got the job as long as nothing that comes back is concerning to us, right? And every employer has different thresholds as to what is concerning to them, right? They can set their own, as the screening company, our job literally is just to tell them, here's what we found.
Right.
And then as the employer, it's your job to decide whether or not that's you want to make a hiring decision based off the information that was found in that report.
I've thought of it as a mirror, at least because I'm a visual learner. And so it's like, you're just going to get the data and just show the data and go, okay, you're the one that's going to say yes or no to this. But our job is to go get the data and then put it in front of you, and then you make the decision. I had, it's going to take us off separate line of thought for just a moment. But because when I asked you if you're headquartered, you said, oh, we're fully remote. Is toxicity or a toxic hire, is it different? Do we evaluate it different than we did pre-pandemic? Like pre-pandemic, everyone was in the box, right?
Is it less important?
Well, do we even, good point. Or do we evaluate it differently? Like you can, like in an environment, we're all in the box. Toxicity seems to be like, I can see it and I can feel it, I can touch it and it's there. Like it's okay. But if you're remote and you're, in London and I don't talk to you, but every once in a while, like the latency of that toxicity, it seems to me like, how do you reconcile for people that are hiring for remote and flexible and hybrid? Do they need to do something different around toxic hires?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it makes it any less relevant being post-pandemic, right? I mean, and being remote, because now there's different levels of what toxicity might mean, right? Yeah, you're not interacting with this person every day in the break room, but maybe they have poor video conferencing etiquette, right? Maybe you hear there's funny videos all the time that you see of like people just calling you on Teams out of the blue without a heads up, and you're like, why is this person calling me? It's like,
Those people.
there's like new technology brings about new definitions of what toxic is, right?
So where does it? Obviously, we're moving really fast here with everything, right? With hiring and all of that. Where's the balance between moving fast and making sure we're doing the right thing by the employees and also by those that we're interviewing and vetting them properly?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's extreme pressure to make good hiring choices, right? But there's also extreme pressure financially to make quick hiring choices. Let's look at healthcare for an example, right? I mean, highly regulated industry, but I saw a study that said the COV, or the cost of vacancy, right, specifically for nurses and physicians, is around $8,000 to $10,000 per day, right? And this is
per nurse per day for that.
Per nurse, per physician, and this is in lost revenue mostly, right? Because when you don't have that doctor at the hospital, you don't have that nurse at the hospital, you're not generating the revenue, right? And then the average time to fill a physician or nurse position is 49 days. Right? Wow. So you're talking almost $500,000 in lost revenue per vacancy. And the average hospital has hundreds of nurse and physician vacancies, the big large medical centers, So so that's where even a 5% reduction in time to fill can save your company millions of dollars, right? Or generate millions more dollars in billable revenue. So where background screen background screening comes in is it's like we want to be integrated with your ATS. We want to be as streamlined as possible and really help you increase your time to fill. So you're not sitting around waiting for the background to come back for sometimes weeks, depending on what part of the country or world you're in. And it's costing you $100,000 while you're sitting there waiting for a background.
For the corporates, is this a math problem to be
Yeah.
solved? Meaning you'll accept toxicity in a cashier at Walmart because it's only going to impact you. The ceiling is only so high
Yeah.
versus what you just described in a nurse or a doctor. The ceiling is going to be much higher, which means that you need to hire faster
Fire
and
faster.
fire faster and not have as much toxicity. Like I just wonder
Well,
if
I also
like
think
is this math?
the yeah, no, I mean, I think the stomach for toxicity increases
Yes.
the higher they are, right? So, I mean,
Right.
if you have a cashier at Walmart, you're only going to tolerate so much, right? Because you probably can go find another person to fill
Agreed.
that role. But if you have a leading physician, so say a top neurosurgeon at your hospital, who's I think of like House, the show
Yeah.
House,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
doctor. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
They kept him
when you think
around
of
on the
like
show.
what a toxic person is, I mean
God,
that's
I loved
but
him.
they would threaten to fire him all the time, but they never did, right?
No.
Because he was good at what he did. He was always right, and like that's so it's like your stomach for what is toxic and what you're able to tolerate.
Mhm.
I think increases the harder it is to replace a person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and this is, I mean, this is probably an awful
Great example.
example, but in my RPO days, there was, I mean, the saying was hire fast, fire faster.
Yeah,
And so for some of the clients, that's exactly what was done because they would tie it back to, right? Especially in development. They knew if they were short 12 developers, this is what the bookings were lacking, right? Each week, and
yeah.
this is what it cost the company. And so hire fast, fire faster. That was the mantra moving in recruiting for developers. So it's yeah, I mean I still think it's that way today,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Jeremy, why does the hiring managers and recruiters why do they make the same mistakes as it relates to toxicity? Why does
It's it's in
why
their
does
nature.
Yeah, you could just remove
I mean,
toxicity. Why do
are
they
we
make
doing
the
the scorpion
mistakes?
and toad? Is this
yeah.
is the story? It's the
I mean, no.
scorpion.
I mean,
What'd you
ultimately, I mean,
expect?
change
Yeah.
is difficult. Change is costly. I mean, ultimately, all these things come down to fear and money, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's going back to the financial side of things. It's much more palatable for procurement teams and CFOs and all the numbers people to write off unrealized revenue. All those unrealized losses from vacant roles than it is to invest in the right tools and procedures, right? Because that's a hard cost that's coming out. Whereas the vacancy is just money off the top line, which is important, but it's easier to write that off than it is to say, oh, we have to go invest millions of dollars in some tool to fix the problem, right? And then you have this highly diluted screening industry where every background screening provider shouts about how they are the fastest and how they have the best technology, and recruiters and talent acquisition folks have just become numb to the noise.
Right.
Do you see? I want to dig a little deeper on the point you just made. Do you see the biggest and best companies in the world that we all know, right? Say, the top 10 in the world, top 50 in the world. Are they treating this the same way when you say they're willing to invest, they're willing to lack the investment in the technology in order, because it's an easier write-off on the other side. Is there I mean, what companies are you seeing this in? Is it smaller companies, mid-sized companies? I'm just curious there.
It's the whole gamut, really. I mean, a lot of companies just they're not willing to make the investment until they're forced to, right? Something has happened, something has transpired that now they need,
Lawsuit.
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's the nature of who we are. It's
Right.
of as humans, right? Like we don't want to do something until we absolutely have to do it. And sometimes, yes, the judicial system twists our arm a little bit,
A
right?
little bit.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get a judgment against you, and all of a sudden it wakes
You act
people up.
quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They look at that top line versus cost, because really it's opportunity cost versus hard cost.
Right.
And so they look at that equation differently once there's a lawsuit involved. So I can see that. Um, so one of the things I wanted to ask you about was about values. So one of the first times I visited Success Factors in San Francisco, went to one of the floors. I can't remember what I was doing there, but there was a big giant wall art that said "No assholes." Like that was just one of their core values at the time. This was pre going public and all that stuff. But it had a big giant circle on it, and assholes is like, listen, that's not allowed. So it just got me to think. First of all, I thought it was fantastic. I thought Lars did a wonderful job in general, but it's values. Like at one point, there's values, and again, like you brought up with House, um, you're kind of you'll be a little bit more elastic. The higher up it is, the harder it is to fill that position. But at one point, it seems to me that there's a relationship between your corporate values, maybe even personal values, and toxicity.
Mhm.
Have your customers, have you thought, I mean, you've been in this game for a long time. Have you talked to people about corporate values and what they're willing to allow and not allow and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think corporate values play a huge role in the overall culture and generally what's permissible and not permissible within an organization, right? And I mean, I think values play a huge part in that, but not but in attracting top talent as well, right? So I mean, people want to work for a company that has a real purpose. If you think about like the purpose-driven companies in the world, like the Tom's shoes, where it's like buy a pair, give a pair, those kinds of things. It's like that draws people in, and that's a culture of giving, right? That is hard to be that's hard to do unauthentically, right? Like, and so yeah, I think it's immensely important, and I think it does ultimately dictate hiring decisions and firing decisions. So
Yeah. Jeremy, what role do you think technology needs to play in this game?
yeah, I mean, technology is I think the almost it's everyone's best friend and the bane of all of our existence at the same time, right? Um, every company hiring at scale needs a few basic tech pieces, right? And first, so it's a robust ATS, an applicant tracking system that's both client and candidate friendly, right? I mean that the how you wouldn't believe how many ATS systems I've interacted with in my life that are not candidate friendly. As you're trying to fill out an application or upload your resume, and it's just so challenging, and you're like, man, if this is a glimpse into what it's going to be like working at this company,
Yeah.
I'm gonna second guess that, right? And I get a lot of our ATS partners are they're aware of that and are very conscious of it and are working on candidate experience is huge in our
Well,
industry,
and
right?
they weren't built for candidates at the
No,
time. In
Not at the
fact,
time, right?
the
In all
newer
fairness,
ones
yeah.
they're really making waves here, and I like. If I had to go into a technology company, I would want to be at an ATS company. I don't know why I'm saying
Yeah.
that, but I probably would because there's so many challenges and so many things you can work on.
A lot of
And
opportunity.
Lot
And a
of,
lot of good things are coming out of it. Like it's
yeah.
actually very exciting for us to be to when we're partnering, with some of these bigger ATSs and just like
hmm
where they're headed and the direction they're going in. We're excited to be on board and
yeah,
partnering with them on those things, right? But the other real crucial piece of technology is to ensure that your screening partner is integrated with that ATS, right? And I mean like fully integrated in a way that makes sense for how you interact with it. There's a lot of screening companies out there, especially on the smaller ones, who will say they have an integration with, with the bigger ATSs, but it's not truly like a custom built integration where you're only using one system and everything like kind of speaks fluently to each other. A lot of the times, things break and it doesn't work the way you want it to. So investigating that component of it, what the integration is, how it works, how they're partnered with that specific provider is crucial. And remember, I mean, like I said, not all these integrations are created equal. So the other important thing to note here too is that when it comes to technology, is that the background check is really just a snapshot in time. You're getting a glimpse of that person up until that point, and so risk management doesn't end at the point of hire, right? And so that's where technology like continuous criminal monitoring, continuous motor vehicle monitoring, license managers, all that kind of stuff comes into play, right? Real time criminal checks, real-time license verifications, real-time motor vehicle reports. All these things are crucial components of ensuring that your risk management stays where you want it to be post-hire, right?
So one thing you brought up the other day that was fascinating to both Ryan and I was a lawsuit. And I think it was Spectrum Charter. I'll let you tell the story because you told us, and it was fantastic. So let's scare the audience. Just kidding. We're not going to scare you, but it is a cool story. So,
yeah, I mean it's a sad story. It's an interesting story. But yeah, what it was, and this took place about 5-6 years ago now, I think. But a cable technician, I believe it was in Texas. Correct me if I'm wrong. It wasn't William.
Of course, it was in Texas. It was actually. It was
a cable technician for, I believe, Charter Communications. Did a house call, came out and installed cable in an elderly woman's home, and then finished the job. And then the next day, called the woman up and said, "I need to do something else in your home." And because he was there the previous day, on official business, she didn't think anything of it, and she invited him into her home, and she was murdered by this fellow. And the family did sue Charter, and it was one of the largest lawsuit settlements in class action history, with a $7 billion punitive damages claim. Now, that's billion with a B. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting thing here too is that this isn't totally a wrongful death claim. The vast majority of that $7 billion came about because of the way that Charter handled the lawsuit. Right, it wasn't specifically there was allegations of forged documents and other things that tried to they claimed, the defendant claimed that they tried to force them into arbitration over the instance based off a forged document, right? And so that's why the jury awarded such a large payout, was because there was some alleged some shady shenanigans that went on post incident, right? But the person the guy who committed the crime did pass a background check, right? So he did not have a prior record when he was first hired by Charter. Now who knows what the extent of their background check program was? Who knows if they only did local criminal searches, or if they extended their criminal searches nationwide or globally? Who knows if they did reference checks or any, previous employment verification? We don't know any of that information, right? That's something that only them and their background screening company would know. But so there's a lot of unanswered unknowns in this situation, but it is a cautionary tale of how the failure to perform true monitoring and truly understanding who your employees are can can cost a lot of money.
So the fascinating part for me, because of the darkness within me, is that he finished the cable installation.
Yeah, yeah. He did it the day before. He actually came back the next day to
Yeah,
murder her.
yeah.
So
See,
That's insane.
that's to me, it's like I would not finish if I'm there.
yeah,
I'm just,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm in that mood.
That's you know what
Done.
I haven't really ever thought about this, Jeremy. This is kind of freaky, right?
Dude,
Like I just had a Verizon guy in here running
yeah,
wires, and I'm
no
like,
big deal.
yeah, go for it. I'll be up here eating. Like I figure, what's he gonna do? Steal a monitor out of the window? Like,
Yeah, good luck.
well, it's funny because after we met and first discussed this
Mhm.
story, I got a text message from LG, my refrigerator company, saying that they need to send a technician into the house
Yeah,
to
right.
do a software update on the refrigerator. And that is, and they scheduled an appointment. And I tell you, I was
You thought
skeptical
twice.
from the
You thought
get go,
twice.
right? I'm like, I call up LG and I'm like, you guys sent me a text message. Is this a real thing? They're like, oh yes, it is a real thing. But also, when that guy came to my door, I was just on him. I was like, here's the fridge. I'm going to stand here and watch you change it because it's like I didn't request this, right? This came randomly out of the blue. It was really interesting, but it was like that was fresh on my mind. So I'm sitting here going, huh,
Yeah,
thinking about the
You
$7
need to
billion
get some
settlement.
mobile, like, do you have like a mobile decisive thing? Throw your fingerprint in, and it runs
Mhm.
the check real quick
Yeah,
on site.
yeah. Hey, how you
I mean,
doing?
Yeah.
come on.
Do
Well,
this.
and talking about like ID verification, right? I was just reading an article about how a big thing right now is people hiring employees who aren't who they
That's right.
interviewed, right? The
Right.
person who shows up for the job is not the person
Yeah.
they interviewed.
That's
And this has been this happens on a more and more frequent basis, especially in like a remote work setting where
sorry.
it's like, I don't know I don't know if they're paying people to do the interview or if it's just or what the circumstances are, but whatever is happening, they're not verifying the the identification properly, and the person who shows up to work is not the same person that they
Well,
interviewed.
we've
So
we've seen a couple cases where
Yeah.
the person that does the interview gets the job, works with the team, but has a team of people doing the work.
Right.
And
yes,
so she has several jobs under different
yeah, they're
names,
outsourcing they're
and they're
outsourcing their
and they're
work.
outsourcing their
Yeah.
work on
I
some
don't hate
level.
that. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
like that's entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
It's the modern day moonlighting, right? I mean,
What's the difference between that and running an agency?
right.
Same thing.
Well, it's a full-time
well,
employment
I think there's just
offering
the ethical
benefits.
There's
there's the
always
ethical
that.
complication of that, the fact that you're passing yourself off as a full-time employee
Right.
versus versus an agency, right?
Yeah.
If you want to operate like an agency, just operate like an agency.
Right.
It's
But when
technicalities.
you're defrauding the company by claim
Yeah.
if they think they're getting 40 hours a week out of you, but you have 4 or 5 other full-time jobs,
Right.
are they getting 40 hours a week out of you? So
No,
Yeah.
they're
No.
getting 70 hours out of your team. They're not getting
yeah,
40. They're getting
Yeah.
5 hours out of you.
Exactly.
I did have
Exactly.
a real quick question about monitoring because we've talked a lot about toxic hiring, and this is the preventable kind of unforced errors at the beginning of the process. But what have you seen, or what have your clients been telling you about how they look at toxicity in monitoring kind of their employees' behavior? Like what happens after? You said that the charter cable person, they had a background check before. Had they had some type of monitoring to understand maybe something went on
Yeah.
that would have
yeah.
popped and
Where
given
Yeah,
where
some.
I don't know the specifics
Yeah,
of that case well
right.
enough to know if he would have if anything would have popped up, in that instance. But there is a lot you can tell by monitoring. I'll give an example, right? So there's a major hotel casino chain in Vegas, employs more than 10,000 people, uses continuous criminal monitoring because they are required by law to notify the Nevada Gaming Commission anytime an employee is even suspected of committing another crime. So they almost legally required to have a service like this.
Right.
And when they first became a client, like I think there were like instantly like 150 hits that
Yeah.
showed up, and it was just and there was just like mind blown, like
Well,
so it,
because I think the gaming commission, I think it's because you use the word, it's accused. If someone's been formally accused of a crime as
yeah
opposed to convicted of a crime, where that's a different threshold, right? So if
Yeah, I
it's
mean that's something you have to be very careful of in background screening, right? Is
that's
arrest
right,
versus conviction, right? There's a
that's right.
big difference between being arrested for a crime and being convicted of a crime, and so a
Accused,
lot,
never
a hu-
convicted.
yeah, right, and a lot. So most of the time, arrests will show up on on a criminal report, right? It'll show you so XYZ was arrested for this. Whether or not that ever went to court trial, maybe it was dismissed, maybe it was thrown out, whatever. If they were never convicted, you're still seeing that an arrest was made, and so that can
Right,
taint your view of that person early on.
100%.
So it's important to have kind of like adjudication thresholds set where it's like do I even care about arrests, right? I only want to know
Right.
convictions because, like I mentioned earlier, as the screening provider, all we can do is show you the information that we've obtained, right? And so how you make that decision is up to you. And so you really need to know what your thresholds are, and what information you even want to be alerted to.
That's really I've never known that. I never knew
Because you
that.
haven't seen Ocean's 11. That's
Well,
why.
I haven't seen
That's what,
Ocean's
Jeremy.
11.
That's why.
Correct.
He
Yeah.
doesn't watch
Yeah.
movies. That's why he
Never
doesn't
watched
Oh,
any
know.
movies. I watch some movies.
Because
I've
it,
been watching movies.
in Ocean's 11, they did it purposely. One of the guys that's going to be on the robbery team, he's they he's his character is then arrested at the table at the blackjack table. It's
right.
all a it's all part of the
Uh,
show.
is that the one with George Clooney?
It is Brad
See,
Pitt.
I
Well, the
knew
remake
that.
was with George Clooney. The original is with the Rat Pack.
That is
So.
correct.
All right. Well, now
And
I'm
that,
gonna have to go
but
watch
they didn't do
something.
3. They only did
No.
Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
But that is good as well.
So let's hear a good story. So we've been dark, right? Let's hear the good. Where's what's an example of a client or just someone that maybe a company that was leveraging ongoing monitoring, that they had this practice in place, they had the tech in place, whether it was through you guys or someone else, where it saved their ass.
Hmm,
Yeah, I mean, so it's challenging because it's like prevention can only tell you so much,
that's right.
right?
True.
So it's hard to know what is ultimately being prevented, right? So we can analogize it to like fire prevention, right? There's lots of things we do in our house to protect ourselves from a fire, and if a fire never breaks out, were those things a waste of our time? No, right? I mean, maybe it's because we did those things that the fire never broke out, and or maybe we just were lucky, and maybe next time we won't be so lucky. So it's really hard to pinpoint and say, oh, this is where they were able to really make a big improvement. I mean, I guess going back to the casino example. I mean, that is one where they can get into real trouble if they're hiring known criminals, right? And lose their gambling license, which puts them out of business, right? And we're talking multi-billion-dollar industry here that it's just not worth. It's not worth it in the end, right? So,
Well, in the financial services stuff, you'd see fraud. And if you could see
Yeah.
fraud, then you'd want to avoid those candidates in nursing and doctors of healthcare. It would be malpractice or other types of things that you'd want to monitor to then help you make a decision. So
yeah,
again, it gets kind of back to the job of CISIV is to get the data and then be able to package the data in such a way to then let them make data-driven decisions.
yeah,
And
exactly.
then, and from one healthcare unit to another, they might make the decision different, and that's okay. But your job is to give them the data, especially on the original for hiring, and then if they choose to monitor and they want to go forward and something like that, that's great too.
That's right. Yeah.
I think in a highly regulated, I think monitoring impersonally. It's just me speaking. I think it becomes more important if someone hasn't, like in the financial service, they haven't kept up with
Absolutely.
their series, all their licensing. Nurses, same thing. If they haven't kept up with their licensing and all that stuff, that's a risk. That's a business risk.
Yeah, education, teaching,
Yep.
the whole bit.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yep.
So, how do you want to close out, Ryan? What do you want to do?
I'll
Oh,
get Jeremy any last thought. This has been great information. Number one, I learned a few things. I
I did
usually
too.
don't learn a few when I do this. It's robust. Is good. A little
My
scared.
struggle is sarcasm and adult language. No, seriously, it's because it can be so misunderstood.
Sure. Well,
That's
and I
it
mean,
would
so this
assume to
is
be
where,
it would be
But
my
it'd be
personality
toxic.
be yeah, it would be
You could
assumptive.
not, you should never be hired in an organization. Consultant, yes. Advisory, yes. Corporate, nobody should ever hire you.
well,
This
this is where,
this
you
is
know,
interesting.
AI becomes dangerous,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
So, I mean, AI is a fun buzzword, right? It's seemingly everywhere these days, but it's a dirty word when it comes to like FCRA governed actions.
Right.
So AI could screen your social media profile and find that you've made lewd and lascivious comments all over the place, but a human really has to go in there and put context around it, right?
That's
Because
right.
you could be jabbing back and forth with a college buddy, and not and just because, even though your profile's private, maybe his isn't, and so that's being found, right? And it's
Right.
like you're not being cruel and ill intentioned, but it happened in a public space, so it's being flagged, right? So the AI is, you have to tiptoe lightly about this, and in all FCRA regulated spaces, the FCRA is gospel when it comes to making employment related decisions based off of information found during the screening process. So, I mean, and that's whether it's a pre-employment background check or an ongoing monitoring. So, just something to think about there.
I like that you added context to toxicity because again, with AI, they might not get the context. And even human beings might miss the context too.
Yeah.
So it's not infallible. But I like the idea that okay, things that are posted or something in your background, there might be some context to that.
Well, and AI, no matter how smart it gets, and it's getting smarter and smarter every day, that's fine. But it still can't tell the difference between a squirt gun and a real gun,
Right.
right? Or if you're online and you go check out these guns, and you do a little flex photo, that it doesn't know if you're talking about your biceps or your AK-47. So
Yeah. For me, it
That's
definitely wouldn't be biceps.
that is funny.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, Jeremy, this has been fantastic. It really
100%.
has. Appreciate the time, and hopefully everyone's gotten some good information out of this. We'll have this posted everywhere. Right,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
gonna go everywhere we streamed, and we'll have it cut up and share it around and all that stuff. So, if you didn't see it, just click play. You're
We got to
probably not
visit
gonna see this before you hit play because we're at the end.
visit
yeah,
Jeremy's LinkedIn profile. Check him out. But
Yeah,
also
yeah.
check me
Sicif.
Check
out.
them out.
What's the domain? What's the URL for Sicif?
Decisive.com.
What?
Yeah, love the name,
Easy,
by the way.
easy peasy.
That's crazy. It says that's short for decisive.
Incisive, maybe. I don't know.
Incisive. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll, it could
Depends
go
on
either
how
way.
you look at it.
Yeah. There's context. Back to the thing. Anyhow, Jeremy, thank you for your time. Don't
I
abuse
appreciate you
this
having me.
authority.
This has been great. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you,
you, brother.
everybody. All right.